Okay, welcome everyone to our first live Between Two Ellens podcast. This was Hefner and really, I think this was mainly Hefner's idea to try to have an opportunity to have a democratic conversation after the state of the state, but also bring in kind of old friends and new friends to kind of have a broad conversation of the impact of what Governor Stitt laid out and kind of our responses to it.
Thank you. I can't take all the credit for it. It's always nice to have Andy Moore that supports us with, he said it's nerdy, but I think it's just very technical, great stuff to help us so that we can be here live. It's great to see all your faces. And so I hope today that we can just talk a little bit about what we heard if you did not hear it. And we'd love to take questions after we discuss a little bit of that with our two guests. Both of them have been on our show, and I'll let you introduce yourself first, President.
Yeah, hi, my name's Forrest, and I used to represent the geographic area where this brewery is, but I am now the president of the American Federation of Labor, Congress of Industrialized Organizations. That's the AFL-CIO. We are the labor movement in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Moore. I am the nerd in residence, apparently, the guy who bought too much equipment and now looks for opportunities to use it. I run an organization called Let's Fix This. We promote voting, civic engagement, and democracy more broadly here in Oklahoma.
Okay, well, so we'll just kick off. Mainly just if you weren't there, I'll just start with Governor Stitt's overall message, as he had 3 points he was wanting to hone to all of us. Is he wants to reduce regulation, protect the vulnerable, and secure our state.
He also wants to get rid of marijuana.
And he wants to get rid of marijuana. So that's kind of like what it kicked off with. And maybe first off, we can hear from Andy and Forrest of like maybe your first thoughts after the state of the state, or what stood out to you.
Nerd guy can go first.
All right, well, I have thoughts. I made a bingo card, and I did not win on my own bingo card today. I had too many direct quotes. I thought it was interesting. This is the governor's final state of the state, right? He's a lame duck governor. He's got just a few months left. I can't believe I've sat through 8 of his state of the state addresses, and so little. I would like to go back to all of his speeches and then track how much stuff he called for that actually happened, because I don't think it's that much. Even in today's speech, it was several things stood out to me. One, how rarely the speaker and the pro tem agreed with him, like by clapping or whatever. I mean, it felt like it was about a third at the time. Towards the end, he had a long commentary about McGirt and tribal issues, and they were stoic, which is not unsurprising, but also telling. He also called for 4 state questions, right? He was asking the legislature, send this to a vote of the people, which tells me, I can't do this. Maybe you can, but they can't either. It's up to us, the voters.
Will you tell people, in case they weren't watching, do you remember what they were?
I wrote it down.
The freezes property taxes was one. Repealing the marijuana was another one. 2. That's 2.
Give him the right to appoint.
3% annual cap. That was on recurring spending.
Oh, right, a budget cap?
That was incredible. And then there was one more.
Appointing the state superintendent.
Yeah. I just thought it is rare, I think, for a governor to call for even one, but calling for 4, it just felt like over and over again, he was trying to, the line between request and demand is thin sometimes, but trying to nudge the legislature to send a vote to the people, which is something that doesn't happen all the time. And I am someone who is very involved in initiative petitions in our state, especially most recently 836 for open primaries. And I heard that through the lens of what else can we put on the ballot to screw with who turns out? Now, the truth is, like, this year is going to be high turnout in November, especially because all of the governor's on the ballot, all these statewide offices are on the ballot. But if these things end up on June with minimum wage, or on like an August runoff ballot, something weird, then we know that it's not about policy, it's about politics.
It's about politics.
Anything stood out to you?
All of those things. His insistence on harping on the tribal affairs stuff is just unreal to me because, yeah, we watched it from one of the legislative offices, and it is always fun to watch. And then somebody had one live stream pulled up that they were cutting to the chamber, seeing who was standing up. But it was just fascinating to watch what the Senate and House leaders did and did not do. There was one particular moment when he talked about school choice. Another thing I think that they're not necessarily winning on, and by they I mean people who are interested in abandoning fixing public education in favor of helping 1 or 2 out of 10 kids. And that's not to say anything bad about anybody who sends their kids to private schools. But the truth is, in today's speech, I think he went further than most people who actually heard this would prefer, which is he was talking about doing away entirely with local control of whether a school goes in. And this happened in Seminole several years ago, that the city voted against
To bring in a charter school.
bringing a charter school in. So they went past them and went to the statewide charter school board and got it authorized. You're doing to a community something that it has expressly said it does not want, which I guess at this point is consistent with the national platform for some Republicans. but I was fascinated by that. And the other thing that I'm sort of bummed out about not being in the legislature anymore is that the moment that speech ended, the governor became a lame duck. And I will be really interested to see how many of those initiatives really take hold. Last year, I saw the governor in the antechamber before he walked in. I had last minute visit to the men's room because I didn't want to be distracted by the intellectual giant. And so I went over and shook his hand because we've had some run-ins and I wanted to end things on a nice note. And he said, "You going to stand up and clap for my ideas?" And I said, "Well, I'll stand up and clap for the ones I like." And he said, "Well, they're all good." And I said, "I'm sure you believe that they're all good." So we get in there. He does his whole rigmarole. Then he stands up, and he one of the things he mentions was, and he was very adamant about this, was reforming the fines and fees for criminal justice. That we should not be funding our judicial system on the backs of the people we are fining and feeing. And that's absolutely true. And I agreed with that. And I stood up fast and I clapped and we made eye contact. And that was the last I heard about it. So, how much of this is just political theater, I don't know. But to bring this full circle, Andy, I mean, if we want to take a bet on this right now, I'm going to say it's politics the whole way through. And the other thing, and I just want to make on the cannabis stuff, I have come around on the issue. When I first started hearing them talk about illegal grow operations and all this, infiltration of foreign governments and all that, at first my knee-jerk reaction was to say you're being xenophobic. But then we got a presentation from some of our OB&DD and all those folks, and sure enough, yes, there is an issue there. What I heard today was a party that controls all 3 branches of government saying, we cannot separate the issue of the illegal grows from the overall, program, which is popular across the board. And in fact, with several legislators, some of whom I think probably stood up and clapped to this, but privately, I just know after 4 p.m. on any given day, you probably shouldn't talk to because. So I will be really interested to see how the Republicans respond to some of these demands by the governor.
Can I, on the note about the marijuana thing, and truth be told, I had stepped away from my computer for a few minutes.
How could you tear
I know
yourself away?
I was getting stuff loaded for this afternoon, and I came
Thank
back
you.
and I heard the tail end of it, and I was like, surely that's not what he said. And then I saw on KOCO that that's definitely what he said. And I rewatched it, and there was no policy discussion in that. It was just like, this is a mess. Send it back to the voters to do away with it.
He said, shut it down.
To shut it down. And I was like, there is no way that Oklahoma voters are going to shut this down. Do we all agree there needs to be some tweaks? Absolutely. There's, we all agree, right? Whether you use it or not, there's things. But aside from everything else, aside from the voters' desire to have that and go into the ballot to get it in the first place, the loss of revenue for the state would be significant too. And it was just one of those things where it's like, it just felt like a knee-jerk reaction to like, I don't know what to do. Let's just close it down without any thought on the implications.
But if we could use his 3 principles just on marijuana alone, reduce regulation, we need regulation on it. We need regulation. Protect vulnerable, of course, because it's medical marijuana. We know that the testing's not happening and that the THC is too high. So we want to protect the vulnerable and then protect the state. Of course, we don't want the illegal grows. I think we can do it. I think sometimes it's too hard. I just think that there are some things that we compromise sometimes because of politics. It's definitely a possibility. If you want to hear what I didn't like hearing, I do not like this word. I don't like the word welfare. I think that we use it too much, and I don't think that it actually portrays what it means when we talk about services and Medicaid. And so when he keeps using that, it makes everyone go, of course not, we don't want welfare. But it doesn't exactly say what we need and what we're talking about, especially with the big, beautiful bill. When he spoke about jobs, that amount of Medicaid is this much. It's very small. The amount of Medicaid that we do need for the state is for our vulnerable adults and our older and nursing care, which is a lot of money, our hospitals for emergency room. And I just think that there are things that we can do, and we need to talk about it, but there's not a lot of people that understand about Medicaid, and we just fall into that welfare, and people aren't, what was that thing about doing it themselves, or things like that. I think the services are there to help support, and I just think that I just didn't care for that line that he was talking about. I always think there's more that we can talk about to help educate people on what that means, because in 2028, we're already seeing some of that, and it's just going to get worse. So we should talk about it and try to help support it instead of just saying, go away.
I think one of the other things that he talked about is, what we hear a lot is billions of dollars of savings, or we've cut all of these state employee jobs. And all of those, to me, are opportunities where we were not investing or having staff members work on core programs in our state. And so he used it as a bragging point. Look at, I had over $5.5 billion in savings, and yet we are losing access to mental health. We're losing access to healthcare. Our education system's not quality funded. We're not top 10 in any of those things. And he's bragging that he held those dollars back. He's bragging that he cut state employees who are the on the grounds boot people who are providing those services across the state. And so, I hear those bragging points and just think, wow, man, read the room.
It's sort of like if the Titanic was sinking and they said we gotta keep half of the lifeboats on the boat just in case. And then as the violins are playing, be like, by the way, did you guys see how many lifeboats we saved? I want to just quickly say, I believe personally, and I can't believe that the governor didn't invite me over more often to talk intellectually about this stuff. But my guess is that it was an arbitrary thing. He wanted to leave office with fewer state employees than he had when he came in. As the president of the AFL-CIO, who fights for working Oklahomans every day, I have to acknowledge that we are aware that a lot of these state jobs that came with pensions or 401ks, that came with benefits, that came with sort of this ladder to advance in your career, were replaced by contract workers, which, one, require a lot of money to onboard, two, come without a lot of those benefits that people rely on to access welfare. And so, in the sunset of the governor's term, one of the things that I think is the saddest is his legacy with regard to our state employees. And so just know, putting this quick plug in, we're going to be pushing for 10% across the $10,000 across the board pay raises for state workers because they deserve it. But also after the last 8 years of this administration, they deserve to feel that they are genuinely appreciated.
I think that's. I apologize. I think that's one of those things that we keep talking about, FTEs and employees. I think we need money. We need to not just do flat budgets and those. We're growing. He talked about all the babies that we're having, but the problem is, I think that we have a spending problem. You know, the idea about having, you know, he knows how to pick a superintendent. He knew how to pick a man to do a good job, you know, in that role. I don't think
He
that
picked Ryan first.
I know, I know. But I also think that we do have some problems with our agencies that spend those dollars. There's not a lot of, I don't know, a vocation that understands those institutions. And so I think it's just what a new idea is sometimes with a new leadership. I'm not saying anything about the people that he's picked. I'm just saying there's not enough of that deep understanding about what the mission is. And so like we do with when we have an election for our state insurance guy, maybe it'd be a good idea if we had that if the governor's going to be able to pick, because maybe the people he should pick should at least have 6 to 8 years in that field or agency or understanding, because I think that would help our state. Businessmen are great, but it's complicated to put a businessman in something that Medicaid is difficult to understand.
It's like, don't ever apologize. It's your show. I'm just a guest here. I agree. It's so funny to me, Forrest, about this issue where he has been saying, you know what we need to do? We should not elect this person. We should just appoint because we messed up on electing him. I'm like, buddy, you appointed the guy as secretary first, and then it kind of from that grew. Aside from Ryan Walters and maybe a few others, but like generally speaking, the election process is working, right? Whether it's the superintendent or the lieutenant governor or the auditor, all these jobs, the framers of the Oklahoma Constitution distrusted politicians and distrusted special interest corporations, right? And designed our Constitution to have a lot of elected offices. Do 38 other states not elect it? Yeah, but a lot of those states also elect their school boards
Yeah.
or Secretary of State, which we don't. So just because a lot of states do something, if that's going to be the metric, we should really get on board because there's a lot of stuff that a lot of states do that is awesome and we don't. But if he's going to pick this one, I think he's out to lunch.
You know, he well, not him, but somebody I called and talked to when we saw that bill about there's insurance commissioner, labor commissioner, and Department of Education, or superintendent of public education that they want to make appointed. One argument made to me was, well, we want to avoid rogue politicians, which is what they're referring to Ryan Walters as. Well, now this is a controversial comment, and I don't know how it's going to go over in this room. I believe we have a rogue politician in the White House right now. So, you know, it's not hard for me to imagine a rogue person getting elected to the governor's office, and who's to stop them from appointing an absolute bat crazy person to be their appointed person, and that doesn't guarantee that they're going to be better about regulating insurance rates or regulating our labor sector or our education system. It's just not. It's a cheap, overly simplified excuse for somebody to get what they want. And I, there's a part of me that has some sympathy for my Republican colleagues because they're trying to stop what was a very uncomfortable situation for them from happening again, which was that people across the political spectrum were calling for them to do something about Ryan Walters, and they said we can't. There's nothing that we can do. The truth is, practically, there's something that they could do. Yes. That idea, hey, if he wanted to, he would. You know what I'm saying, girls? But there was the political will was not there for that, and that, like, we cannot glaze over that. Let's stop there for a second and just ask ourselves, hold on, why wasn't? Let's just not accept the premise of that. Why wasn't there political will? Why can't elected officials do the work of also educating their constituents about what's going on and listening to them? And the truth is, to me, money is a huge problem in politics. But the biggest problems that we have in the political system today are ones that they just do not want to touch. And so they come up with the next most logical solution. And oftentimes those solutions are ones that cut into your rights, that cut into your ability to have to be able to weigh in on the people that represent you or the processes that control major parts of our lives. So, this is my call to action for everybody that's listening to this. That you have a role to play in this system at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level. And if you're not picking up your phone or sending an email, then then ask yourself why you're not doing it. Because I've told people, if we got 6 or 7 unique emails or phone calls from people about a particular issue at the legislature, we paid extra attention because so few people are engaging with us. And then they sit back and they ask themselves, why are they doing this? But you know what? I don't pay attention anyway because it's not like they respond. Well, they're counting on that. So let's just challenge them on that. Let's while we're waiting around for them to come up with a better way to do things, let's lean in a little bit.
Absolutely. I guess one of the other topics I had written down is public education. And I wrote down one of the things he said, our public system is flawed. And every time he talks about public education, he comes at it from the standpoint that if you were in that system, there's no way you chose to be in that system. And that always, like, as a public school parent, that like puts me in fight mode because I'm like, no, all of these people are choosing to be there. What you're choosing to do is not show up, fund it, and support it like we're asking you to. And so he kind of went through his history of all of the amazing things he's done for public schools to try to make more choices for public schools kids. And I will say, you know, we do have an open transfer policy, which when people talk about kids don't have choices, we absolutely do. Every public school in this state, you can transfer to a different public school. So at the end of the day, we have opened, you know, that door wide open. But again, not reading the room, he has told every single agency at the state that you have to have a flat budget, that we have no funding. We have billions behind us, but don't talk about it. We have no funding to support your agency. But we somehow have money to lift the cap for anyone to access money to go to private schools. And I will say, when he said, let's lift the cap, not a single person stood up. And they are like, you know, you're just sitting there because you've watched them stand up for all these other things. And again, read the room. No one's interested in this legislation. So, you know, that gave me a little bit of optimism as we move forward because we know in states where there is no cap, it has decimated their budget for core services that people actually want us to invest in. So that's my education thing I wrote down.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you happen to remember from your time in education world, like how today's Common Ed budget compares to 2016, 10 years ago? That's pre-walkout, so maybe that's not fair.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I'm looking at my old colleague. It has increased. I think
he said that, right?
He's increased. But I will say I was in a presentation by our Secretary of Education, Dan Hanlon, who was talking. They were talking about investments. And if you look over a 20-year time frame, and it shows all of the states around us, and we talk about our, you know, historic investments, it's like here, but then you see all the other states that are still above us. And so you're like, okay, we've historically invested more, but we also underinvested so long. So to me, it's a catch-up fund versus a getting ahead fund.
Right. And I mean, I don't know what that presentation said, but too often I see it's, what's the old adage? There's lies, damned lies in statistics, right? And so you see a presentation where it's just raw dollars. You're like, oh, that's great. But the like per pupil spending is down or proportional. It's when you start digging into the numbers, it's not as rosy as maybe they present. And I think that's the case. You know, I got into politics 10 years ago because of a major state budget crisis, and they were doing across the board budget cuts. And I learned then, this is burned into my brain until I die, that from 2008 to 2018, I think that 10-year period, this is from OK Policy, that state agencies as a whole had been cut an average of 40%. 40%, 40. That's almost half, right, over a 10-year period. And if we are expecting our state to perform anywhere near the same level 10 years later or 20 years later now, when we have only given it the same amount of money, that's like if I said, all of you, your income is frozen today and you won't go up for 20 years, even 10 years, and you're expected to have the same standard of living. That's ridiculous. And when we're doing that to our state, every time he asked for flat budgets, I was like, that's a cut, bro. Yes. Like, that's a cut. I don't care. If you don't get a raise once a decade, you're hurting, and we are hurting.
A flat budget is always a cut budget.
Yeah.
Because regardless of the area, there's going to be a cost that goes up. And so what you're really asking them to do is to do the same at minimum for less and at more regularly than not to do more with less.
Especially when we had 1,000 new Oklahomans he talked about. You know, we have 1,000 new Oklahomans.
Last week.
Yeah.
That was wild to me.
1,000 new Oklahomans. And so that you'll hear MOE, maintenance of effort, which means we're just doing what we're doing and not looking to help anyone else or to serve anyone else. And it's really chips away at everything that we've already built up, programs that we've had or services or education. But he tells us to meet the moment and to dream big. So what's your big dream? He said at the end, dream big.
What's mine?
He told us to dream big at the
dream?
end. He said dream big, not
More-
big dream.
More
dream.
life rafts on the Titanic. You know, I mean, just a shameless plug here. I'd like for us to not be a right to work state anymore.
There you go.
When I was in the legislature, my big wish list item was high speed rail from Oklahoma City to Tulsa. And in my first year, and every time I post this on social media, it's just like bait for the worst trolls in the world. And they're like, "There's no ROI on that." I'm like, well, I wonder what the ROI is on this road behind us here. Or Oklahoma City Boulevard. Are we getting revenue from that road? No, but we just do it because cars drive. Anyway, it's an infrastructure project. It's a jobs project. And it's just cool because I like trains. But every time, you know, I asked that. And so my first interim study, after my first year, we did this. The original thing was, want to talk about Oklahoma City to Tulsa. All of these cities and towns across the state of Oklahoma reached out. They wanted to be a part of it. We used to have passenger rail. This was decades ago, and we would really like to be a part of the conversation. It was incredible to me how many people were interested in having that conversation. And it was like, you know, it was a fever dream because at the end of the day, like we cannot fund education at the levels that we need to, let alone, you know, get a new big project going. But I think to me, it's all the same. I mean, I can, if this were a different podcast called Let Me Connect the Dots, I would talk about how removing right to work and building high-speed rail and things like that would be more possible. But my ask is that we're able to dream big and actually make good on it. And there will not be a time where we are able to dream big and then take action on it if the policy of the state is let's keep socking away money so that we can show on our balance sheet that we're doing well, when in the reality on the streets of Oklahoma is that people are hurting. And I'm old enough to remember when the Democrats got shellacked because we kept saying, no, the economy is not as bad as Fox News is saying it is, but people felt like it wasn't good for them. And people are feeling squeezed right now. And so, you know, I wish that my dream could be bigger, but the truth is we live in a state where the biggest dream people can have right now is a state government that is more responsive to them than it was before.
Very good. Very good. I like your dream. I like your dream.
Love hyping everybody up with that cheery.
Okay, so we're going to move to questions. If anybody from the audience has questions or things that they hoped we had talked about that we haven't talked about yet.
You can probably just shout them out, and
Yeah.
we'll repeat them for the recording. How's that sound?
Who's got a question?
No cursing.
It's not a question. I work for the Department of Human Services, of course, in the state of Hawaii. And we are tightening our belts. And we are looking at all of our positions. Should we fill this one? Should we fill that one? We're going to cut. We're looking at the contracts. We do have some contracts that we've had for years that are really essential. And could we save money there? Could we save money here? It's just, you know, our employees have not had raises for years. And
So I get to do a bunch of things we call one-offs in the legislature because when things don't work and we don't have enough employees or we don't have a system that's not from 19 clickety-clack that we can actually get things to people or answer a phone call. And I got a text today that said, my daughter has to complete something. I have to get her with her Medicaid on the DDS side. I got to really do this. I was on hold for 4 hours, and then they told me they wouldn't be able to get me. So I had to call back again, and the due date for this is in 2 days, and I can't get this to work or anyone to answer the phone. Is that working? Like, we're wanting to cut, and we're not really trying to figure out. So that's why I say we have a spending kind of problem on what we're spending our money on, because we know those programs and support and waiver services and all that stuff, they work. The problem is we've got a bottleneck. We have employees sometimes that don't, I mean, I do know more than some employees, maybe not you, but it's hard to get things to move, especially if you guys work 9 to 5 or 9 to 4 sometimes, maybe 9 to 3:30. And on the weekends, I'm free to talk and to get answers, but there's no one there to help. And then we put the pressure back on parents to take time away from their job to try to figure it out and wait 4 hours. So now her daughter may lose, but she knew we're friends. And so she said, I didn't want to call you. And I go, of course you should call me. She was in tears. So it's not working. And I always tell people, especially agency directors, I say, if you have not filled out an application for any of the programs, you're going to need my help. Because we can always hire someone to try to fix things, but until you get someone who understands it, we're not going to be helping people, and you're still going to get bad press about it because we're still not doing the help for people. It didn't answer anything. I'm just saying, yeah, why are we cutting more when we're not doing what we're supposed to with our money?
And the comment was that she works for DHS, and they have had a hard time deciding whether they're. Well, nobody repeated the question, so I'm trying to.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that.
We made a promise and we didn't deliver on it. What are we? The governor's cabinet? All right.
Well, and I think one of the problems that is so frustrating when we go back to the budget is, what DHS last week at the Capitol, you do budget, or the last 2 weeks before session, you have budget presentations by all of the agencies. And so they'll go through, and this is honestly, even though that they asked for a flat budget, the majority of agencies actually didn't ask for a flat budget, even though they were instructed to, because it has to be that bad when you've been appointed by the governor and he told you to ask for a flat budget and you still don't ask for it because you know that you're not delivering the services that you need. And so when we're asking questions, one of the examples from DHS was on child care subsidies. That's something we hear a lot about, that we are losing child care and that we haven't been able, we're not paying what child care cost. And so through these subsidies, there's a lot of child care like houses and places that are accepting these, but the cost is not keeping up with what it actually costs to take on these kids. And so there's a lot of child care workers that were there. And so as we were bringing up questions, we learned, that we don't have the amount of space that we used to, that, families are really struggling. And then their solution is, well, we don't have enough money. So the example they gave is that they're going to reduce child care subsidies. If you're a family of 4 with 2 kids, you used to get a subsidy if you made $80,000. Now they're going to reduce that to $55,000. So that's their solution for saving money. But again, these families who are barely being able to provide child care because the cost is so much are now going to be tapped out of the market. So mathematically, it doesn't solve the problem. It means less people are going to be paying for childcare, and they're going to have different options.
And it doesn't keep those parents in a job then.
And then it doesn't keep people in the workforce. And so that to me is like, you're listening to these, agency heads who are telling you we are not meeting the need. And then out of the other side of their mouth, they're saying we're doing less with more, and look at what we're doing. And you want to be like, that doesn't make any sense to me because it doesn't. And at the end of the day, our employees are stretched thin, and they're not, content with the work that they're doing because they're not able to do the work that they want to do. And so I don't know how you make that right. But they love to say, don't throw money at it. And I don't want to throw money on it. I want to fund the programs we promised people we were going to fund.
Yeah, but it would be fun to just see what that's like. Every
Yeah,
once in a
I would
while.
love to physically just throw money.
Any other questions? It's quiet.
So you all brought up the fact that governors have to be able to appoint certain positions, state superintendent and such. What would be the opportunity to set, okay, you want to do this, we'll do this, but I used to own a business on conservation, now running a nonprofit, but whenever I was hiring a project manager, they needed to have experience in construction to know how to do this. They needed to have these different things. That if that's going to happen, go ahead and set the lines and signs and the guardrails. That if you're going to, hire a superintendent, I know superintendents, my wife's big in education. That's a complicated deal, and just putting in a businessman because they have common sense does not make sense. So, if that was going to happen, what steps do you see legislation having to to establish those guardrails?
Man, I have a
Could you repeat the question?
yes, thank you. He asked if we were going to put in requirements for statewide offices, what would that look like, and what would that process be, and what would we, try to prioritize? And my sort of, I don't know. I kind of separate myself from somebody here said it was maybe a good idea. I don't at this point know if it really is, because you can have somebody who has a lot of experience and still isn't going to do right by us. I mean, we've had this governor for 8 years. He has experience being a governor. He's still not doing a good job, and that's just my opinion. But I would say, like, you don't want to make it too like, you don't want to make it so like you got to have 20 years of experience and X accolade and X credential and all that, because you don't want to exclude too many people from it. But I think about the insurance commissioner as a really solid example of this right now, because everybody who has been the insurance commissioner for the last 300 years has been somebody who has had an insurance background. Glenn Mulready is the current insurance commissioner. He and I worked together for 2 years in the legislature. Personally, I like the guy. I disagree with the way that things are set up in Oklahoma, that we are a file first state, which means the insurance companies can file their rates, and if we decide to take issue with it, we can then take issue with it. He has not taken issue with any of those rates. His argument is we are in a capitalist market, and the more restrictions we put on something, the fewer options the people will have. Well, the truth is that we need to make there are tougher decisions that we need to make in order to bring the costs down for people. And instead, we're doing things like saying, well, let's get rid of the property tax because the burden of all of it together is too much. But the burden of getting rid of the property tax, I'm getting way away from the question. But the point is, there is a domino effect when you do these things, and the end result may not be materially better. So I think that there's a really interesting balance that you have to strike, because at the same time as experience matters, fresh eyes on something is also really important. So,
I mean, maybe we could say that leadership could be there for a little longer than a year or 2 years, because that's what's happened in some of our agencies is we've had, 4 directors in the past, 8 years, and you really can't really get a hold of the agency, especially the large ones. So I know this is something we should talk about and not just come up with one answer. It's a kind of a good idea to have an understanding of it, but maybe there's something else. I don't know.
your problem now, not in the legislature anymore.
But the issue is that before there were boards who appointed who the department heads were. And when that was removed, the governor took over who was appointed. And the people that he has appointed have not had the wherewithal in that agency, and also haven't had the staying power. So you're talking about Department of Mental Health. I was leaving that meeting just frustrated that the person didn't know enough about the Department of Mental Health. They had been there 3 months, I don't know, 5 months, I can't remember, 6 months maybe. But I'm talking to Republicans, and one of the Republicans says, I'm so frustrated. I feel like I've gone through too many DHS directors and too many Department of Mental Health. And I thought, hey, man, you got a bill for that? We got to get rid of just this appointment process for the governor. There's no staying power. And so I think we have to rethink that process entirely. And boards used to appoint, and those boards used to come with the qualifications to understand the industry that person is overseeing. And when we took that out, the governor doesn't have that wherewithal to do
To
that.
understand the industry and not be a clueless person about management.
Yes.
Right.
Or budgets or all
Yes.
the pieces that go with it, and that's what I see a lot is this governor appoints business people that know nothing about mental health. Well, that's fine, but you've got to understand the goal there, or it doesn't matter.
Right.
Also,
That's exactly right.
Government is not to be run like a business. Business is run for profit. Government is supposed to be run for the benefit of the most people possible, with the most reasonable tax base
Right.
for them possible.
Right.
Oklahomans versus self-interest. He said that today too.
I cannot believe he didn't let me have a pass at that speech before he gave it.
To answer your question about I'll give you my perspective on the boards and commissions and directors and all that. And it comes to the history lesson that I'm sure you all know, so just indulge me for a minute. But when Governor Stitt got elected, this was one of his first things was like, hey guys, I'm a hotshot. You should let me appoint more of these agency directors. We don't need all these boards. That's just bureaucracy. Let's get rid of them. Is it bureaucracy? Yeah, but like bureaucracy creates jobs, and sometimes it makes things go slow on purpose for good reasons. Like, let's do a nationwide search for the best person for this job. We have a team of highly qualified, knowledgeable people who select someone who is highly qualified and knowledgeable. And they did have job descriptions. Since then, since the legislature gave Governor Stitt the ability to appoint a lot of these agency heads, he has appointed, I think it's 3 or 4, I forget the exact number, people to jobs for which they were not statutorily eligible, right? And then he had to be like, whoopsie, my bad. Well, we should change the rules. Okay, now we're just like eroding it from what it was before. And so I think your point is well taken. There should be job descriptions. We should aspire to greatness. I don't just want a good superintendent. I want the best superintendent. I want the best insurance commissioner. And like, if they are appointed, they're basically accountable to one person, right? Their boss. Maybe it's the governor. But if they're elected, at least in theory, and we can talk about incentives for politicians, but at least in theory, they are incentivized to appeal or to do a good job for all 4 million Oklahomans or whatever. I know the incentives in elections are screwy right now. We're trying to fix that.
I want to just say, as a guy who was in the legislature for the last 2 years of Mary Fallon's administration and then watched this happen, the Republicans gleefully give this power over to the governor. What we had before, and I'm going to use 2 examples. Joe Albaugh was in charge of Department of Corrections. This guy like ran one of the Bush's
FEMA. He ran FEMA under Bush,
and he ran not a liberal, standard bearer by any means. And the director of the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, Terry White, both of them were way out ahead of the governor and any legislative Republicans on those issues. Joe Albaugh was saying, stop sending us so many people. That is the big problem with the overcrowding of our prisons and the strain that we're feeling. Terry White said, we are having a substance abuse and mental health crisis in Oklahoma, and we are sending a lot of those people into the justice system as opposed to getting the help they need. They were way out ahead, and this seems like a foreign concept now because like everybody's on the same page about this. I think it's a bipartisan thing. At the time, it was not, and they were really taking a lot of political risks. What was unique about that was that they had legislative liaisons that went directly from them to the legislature. They did not pass through the governor's office. They did not collect $200, and we were getting real data, real information from the agency directors. And then, we could make the wrong decision anyway, but at least we had the right information, When the governor took those powers, not only did he have direct hiring and firing, but he funneled all of that communication through the governor's office. So we were getting the rosiest picture because he was more interested in that. To your point, like he wants us to look good on paper, but the truth is, if you love a place, you have to look at what's not working and fix it. Otherwise, you're in an abusive relationship. Yeah. And that's what we're in right now because the legislature, and by extension, the 43,000 people that each of us represented, that they still represent, are being gaslit by their government. And in order to fix that, so I'm glad that we got around to that. I kind of missed that aspect of the question. The truth is, it's about so much more than the person in the place. And we really did have a good bureaucracy around those people to really have checks and balances, many checks and balances in every agency, and the bumper sticker politics of, shit-talking bureaucracy led us to this moment where we have this government that has really just been chopped up for parts, and the people are suffering as a result. But God, it looks good in a tweet or on a bumper sticker. So
just to say something about that, like how you're talking about the information and not having it to go through the governor's office with DHS and the waiting list. Gosh, before he came into office, we knew all the people that were waiting, to get services. So the support groups were easier. We knew that in Cotton County, how many people were waiting and where we could find parents to do some parent support. I worked at a nonprofit at that time. But before that, Director Lake and then, of course, Howard Hendricks knew that they didn't have the money to support, and they helped us build that parent support. After that, not having any information about who was waiting was pretty detrimental. And so I think that is the thing, like, and even I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to get elected and I'm going to get this information. Oh my gosh, it was difficult to get. And so now things are a little bit loose. In this last year, I asked for things just the other day and I got everything I asked for. But it's it's got to have a little of that, and a little of this and a little of that. It's got to be a vocation, something about understanding what the job is.
We have time for one last question. Yeah.
In your interim study, outside of cost, were there any roadblocks or hurdles, legal or structural, that would keep Oklahoma from having high-speed rail?
Great question. He asked about the most important topic in the room, which is the feasibility of high-speed rail. The rail barons are the problem. The freight rail barons are bullies, and I will fight them in the streets. Not near a rail line, though, because I feel like they've got the upper hand. That is the big. I mean, their lobby is more, and this shouldn't surprise anybody, but the greed of these massive companies who make money moving goods around the country on rail lines are uninterested in cutting into their profit even a fraction in order for people to be able to move around more freely. The airlines certainly lobby against fixed rail across the country, but the freight rail, boy, the discipline of me not cursing about this, because when I announced that interim study, this very bubbly lobbyist came up and said, "I would love to help. We're very interested in what you're talking about." And what it meant by that was, we're going to crush your dreams. And so just a few things, like there is, I'm not going to use the correct terminology, but like rail cars used to be a certain length, and you could turn off into this like side rail. God, I'm so bad at this. I represent some rail workers now. What's it called?
Switch.
Yeah, a little spur, like you go boop, boop, and what's that?
Siding.
A siding. That sounds right. So they'd pull over basically and let the passenger out. And it's been several years, and I've had a few beers since then. But I think that there is a federal law that says passenger rail gets priority. So the best way to avoid giving priority to passenger rail is ensuring that it doesn't exist in the first place. And on top of that, they have the length, and anybody who has been stuck in, with all due respect, this big league city that regularly gets stopped because of a massive train right through downtown. Every time I say big league city, all respect, Casey Cornett, I do love Oklahoma City, okay? But my God, every time pisses me off. So they're so long that those sidings they don't work anymore. I was on the 25th anniversary rail service of the Heartland Flyer, pour some out for a struggling train. And there was a lady who had been an engineer for BNSF for 50 years. And we were sitting in Amtrak sent in the scenic car. Like you could see panoramic views. It was beautiful for about 5 minutes of that trip, and the rest of it was just, what you usually see on the highway. But she was talking to me about the rail links and how irresponsible it is and how greedy it is. And this woman worked for the company, So anyway, you didn't.
Can I give you a fun fact?
Well, it might
Fun
just
fact,
make me more frustrated.
No, make you happy. My first visit to Oklahoma was in 1979 on an Amtrak from Chicago, and we were just right there downtown in Santa Fe, and got to come here and visit Oklahoma City for the first time. So it was possible back in my early years.
And we've been trying to get that restored. And you know what? That was a very niche.
It was the best trip ever.
That was a niche question for the final question, but in my selfish way, I just want to bring this back to the larger thing, which is that I really hate to tell you, but I think it's a very clarifying thing that right and left is not the game right now. It is those who put profit before everything else, before the vast majority of us who, given our druthers, would put community first. And whether that is passenger rail, even if not everybody in this room wants that, or it is making sure that the waiting list is taken care of, even if you don't personally have somebody who needs that, or if it is public education, even if you don't have a kid, it's about the fact that there are a lot of us that want good for everybody in our neighborhood and everybody in our community, but unfortunately the people that control governments right now are more interested in profit. And that comes down to money in politics. And as a union leader, a labor leader, my frustration is that we will never beat the capitalists on money in politics. But what we can all do in this room is beat the selfish interests on showing up. Because nobody's showing up for, Alphabet, or which is, Google's parent company, or, Amazon. Nobody's showing up because they just want to make sure people aren't being too mean to Jeff Bezos. People will show up for each other if we just make people feel that they can. And eventually, we'll get passenger rail.
Wow. Yeah.
And other stuff,
Well, thank you. Thank you all so much. Seriously, I can't believe the turnout we've had. Keep listening Between Two Ellens. If you don't listen to it and you just saw about it, Ellen and I have a podcast called Between Two Ellens. We try really hard to take an issue that is happening in Oklahoma and bring an expert on to talk about it. And we're grateful for our guests tonight.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having me.
guys.
Call it what you want, but I got a feeling. I'm impatient, trying patient.